So what I wanted to start talking about today is we're in the 3 weeks, and the 3 weeks start on the 17th of Tammuz and end on Tisha B'Av, actually the day after Tisha B'Av, the 10th of Av. And it's a time of mourning. One isn't allowed to listen to live music, one isn't allowed to have weddings, and the 9 days are times of mourning where there are many other things that you don't do. And it's a tragic time. Many of the Jewish tragedies happened in this time. So on the 17th of Tammuz, the walls were breached. There was on the 10th of Teves, the Jerusalem was, what's the word when you put a siege, and then the 17th of Tammuz, the siege was broken, and then 3 weeks later, the temple was destroyed. But the other times, and the temple was destroyed both times on the same date, and so we talk about Tisha B'Av as being a time of sorrow, and what I often talk about here is that each day has within it the seeds. So when you have Shabbos, it's got the seeds of Kedusha, holiness that you can tap into. And when it's Simchas Torah, you tap into the joy. And when it's Tisha B'Av, you tap into the sorrow. So the idea is that there are emanations from heaven that relate to each day, and as Jews we tap into it, and it's not about becoming miserable, but it's about understanding that not only is it our relationship with Hashem, but it's part of our spiritual journey that we should be doing. So we are going through really, really, I don't know what words to use, tough, tragic, horrible, horrendous. I'm using catastrophic language because these are real. We're at war. It's escalating, and things are really, really bad. And it's a time for us to, I suppose I don't know how to put this because it's not a good thing, but everything's good, is it can make us understand a lot of what we learn in the Torah much better, because as I mentioned last time, there are a lot of wars in the Torah, and until recently I never really understood, if the Jews come out and they're fighting Amalek, and then this week's parasha they're fighting Midian and all these wars. And in fact in this week's parasha, Hashem tells Moshe knows he's going to die, that before you die you need to finish off the Midianites. And it's exactly what we say, you've got to finish off Hamas, right? You cannot let any of them remain, because then we're in danger. So it gives you that understanding now in a current day perspective that was the same thing that was going on then. And Moshe was the person that needed to do it. Hashem gave him the job because he knew that Moshe was the one who'd be able to wipe out the Midianites. So that's one parallel that makes you understand the Torah more, and Jews, our main purpose and what we're doing in this world on a scale of fighting evil and things like that. During the 3 weeks, there are 3 Haftorahs, and they're called the Haftorahs of Tribulation. And I was listening to a shir about the one about this week, and he says a very interesting thing. It's about a Yirmiyahu, and if you read it, it sounds awful. It sounds like curses. He sounds like he's really yelling. Different, like Isaiah is known as the prophet that talks about, we have that famous saying, when Mashiach comes, the lion will lie down with the lamb. Isaiah is much more uplifting. And Yirmiyahu is like fire and brimstone. When you read it on a simple level, it's not such a pleasant one. He really sounds like someone who lost it and was sort of rebuking everybody. But when you learn it from a Hasidic point of view, all of those rebukes mean something much deeper. But the main thing that Rabbi Kaplan was saying, and I thought I really wanted to bring it into the shir today, was that actually these are weeks of empowerment. They are weeks of tragedy, but they're also weeks of empowerment. And what he means by that, and it's something that we learn in Emet, that we are responsible for ourselves. So we don't say, that person made me angry. We say, I anger myself by what I tell myself. No one has the power to make me angry. No one can make me act badly. I'm making choices. I anger myself, I stress myself, I act impulsively. And a lot of people don't like that. That's why often people won't go for therapy or won't come to an Emet group, because it's much easier to be a victim. It's much easier to say, anybody would be upset in this situation. I hear that often, right? You hear people go, anybody would be upset if they had a sister-in-law who did this. Anyone would be upset if they lost their job. But the truth is, it's not true. You can learn a way that even if something external happens, you can choose your response. And so it's about taking responsibility and realizing during these times that we actually do have a lot of power, which I'm going to explain to you. So the idea is that we are responsible we have the ability to make changes. I don't want to draw a causal link, although many commentators do talk about that the reason Tisha B'Av came about was because of our own sins. So the one we always talk about, and every year this time, and you can never reiterate it enough, so I'm going to go over it again, is that the temple was destroyed because of causeless hatred. It wasn't destroyed because of the Romans. Our disunity, our hatred for one another, for no reason, was what caused it. And the famous story of Kamsa and Bar Kamsa was one Jew who excluded another Jew from a party and humiliated him in front of all the elders, all the sages. The sages did not stand up for him, so he was told to leave the party. He offered to pay for himself, he offered to pay for the whole party. He was shooed out, he was humiliated, and no one stood up for him. And so he went to the Romans and he set the whole thing in motion by taking a sacrifice for them, causing a blemish in the sacrifice, which he knew that the Kohanim would not use because the animal had a blemish. The Romans were offended and the whole thing happened. But really the underlying reason is causeless hatred. And that's why we talk about, for the world to change, we need to have causeless love. We should stop going, I only like people who are like me, or I only like people who treat me well, or I'll only be kind and give a gift if they give me a gift. It's causeless love is I will choose to be loving to every single Jew and basically to every person and to the world, because that is the value I ascribe to. You don't have to deserve it. You don't have to. There's no reason for it. The only reason is because that's who I want to be, or that's the right thing to do. So because it's like this every year, but because we are going through such difficult times, more than ever, we really need to go out of our way to have causeless love. And really, each of us who has now the tools where we can put aside our grievances, we have emet tools, we can do better, should think of doing a mitzvah today and in the coming weeks where we stretch ourselves with causeless love. Think of someone you do not like and change that. Think of some conflict you have and change that, because that's our empowerment.
So if it's someone we don't like, do we actually have to change how we feel, change how we behave, so that we are kind to them, but we don't have to really love them? We should try and actually change them.
Well, it's both. So it's always easier to change behavior, so you should always behave. One of the emet tools is I protect my boundaries with love, not hate. So you're allowed to protect your boundaries, but with love, not hate. So anything you do that's insulting or derogatory or difficult, it's easier to change your behaviors, and another emet tool is to wear the mask. But ultimately, you want to love, and what you love is their essence. You see that they are godly, just like you are. And God has created them uniquely with their quirks. And that's what it means to love a fellow Jew. You don't love them because they're well groomed. You love them because they are God's creation. If you can't do that, the level before that is compassion, is that you give the benefit of the doubt. So you get rid of your hatred or your anger or your vengeance by giving them the benefit of the doubt. And you understand that they are doing the best they can with the tools that they have. So you find a way of having compassion. Someone in one of my other groups gave a really interesting example. She came out and someone had thrown, she said it looked like a burger all over her car, like the roof of her car, and it was disgusting. And as she was driving, she was like really getting more and more upset. And by the end of the drive, she had used emet in her mind, and she said she found compassion. She actually thought, if someone actually had to come out in the middle of the night and smush my car with a burger, they must really be struggling. So that's another level where you find compassion. And you're able to stop going. She said in the past she would have like wanted to take vengeance and wanted to find out who it was and get the CCTV camera and prosecute. But then she went, it's just a hamburger, and actually it can be cleaned. And that poor person, like, I'm not going to be dragged into it. So there are different levels at which you can do it. But we want to strive to be loving, and that's an act actually. Love is an act, it's a verb, not necessarily a feeling. So you can act loving even if you don't always feel it. And acting loving means being respectful, means if that person needs your help, even if you don't like them, you act in a loving, generous way towards them. So we have it. We can sit and we can doom scroll and we can read the news. I'm not accusing, I do this all the time, and get upset. Or we can actually rise up like lions, lionesses, and actually go, this is our time to use all the tools we have to make a difference. And the way we make a difference is in a spiritual way. Of course, you give charity, whatever else you can do, but to change the world, that is what's going to bring Mashiach and peace, is to actually empower ourselves to do the right thing. And you will influence people by doing that. You don't have to say anything and you don't have to lecture anybody, but the more you behave this way, your circle of influence will also get better at it. The less you get engaged in Lashon Hara discussions and the less you work yourself up about things and you become calmer about things, the people around you will also change the way they talk about things. So don't feel powerless. These are exactly the weeks. One of the reasons these weeks are good, and I hear it all the time on all the podcasts I'm listening about Israel, is we've been through this before, and Jews have always survived. My one daughter's very funny. She copies comedians, so I can't do it like her, but there's an Israeli comedian she listens to, and he says to the audience, he says, we're going to win, don't worry. He said, we'll lose a few friends along the way, but we're going to win. And that's the truth. Unfortunately, we lose friends along the way, but we will win, and we will come out of it. And it's not pleasant, and it's going to be awful. But we are, because Jewish history, we have 4,000 years of history, that our history is we go down and we come up. That's why the Jews are likened to the moon. We wax and we wane. And a few years ago, we were thriving, and we were the startup nation, and everyone said, that we've got the best technology and we're absolutely fine. And now we're reminded that it's not so simple. And we wax and we wane. But our power does not come from the army. It comes, as I said last time, actually from Hashem. And I was just listening to Rudy, what's his surname? Right. I was listening to a podcast on Hannah's chapters, brilliant. And I don't know anything about him, but he was saying, sorry? Hannah's chapters. She's Hannah Hershowitz, and she's got the most fabulous podcast. And she interviews, he had just come out of Gaza in April, and he was in Australia, and she interviewed him. And one of the things, I know nothing about him, maybe you know, but what he was saying is, we are protected by Hashem's. We can turn the heating off if you like. Michelle, would you mind turning the heating behind you, Michelle? Sorry, it's just behind you, if you can just switch it off, thanks. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, Josh kindly turned it on. Sorry? Yeah, but it's called Hannah's Chapters.
Not Hannah's story.
No. So basically, he was talking about that we are protected by Hashem's protective shield. And then he said something quite dogmatically. I don't want to say it as dogmatically, so I am, which is true, saying it in his words. He was saying, before this war broke out, the Jews had never been so disunited. And when we are weak, that is when our enemies can beat us. And that's what happened with Kamsa and Bar Kamsa. The Jews were fighting each other. They were weak. And that's why the Romans had the power to destroy the temple. No one really has real power. And we have to work, especially during these weeks, be reminded that we have the cure. And the cure is to build unity. Just watch your words. I was listening also and reading some of the stuff about, Trump and Biden. And after the Trump assassination, there was this whole article, but there's so much about it. Like, the divisiveness, the hatred between political parties. It's no longer, bless you, a healthy debate. It's become murderous. It's become wishing the other person dead. It's believing, and I don't, that Trump staged that. No sympathy for what Trump went through. And even the way, I'm not saying Biden should have stayed as the president, but the way they humiliated him for having dementia. Like, the poor guy, like, so uncompassionate. Yes, maybe he shouldn't be president. That's one thing. But to keep showing him falling and calling him an idiot, and it's just so disrespectful. It's causeless hatred. If someone is losing their memory, yes, he shouldn't be president. But to belittle him and humiliate, and this is what's on both sides, and we're living in such a divisive situation. And so when Biden said tone it down, yes, it's good to tone it down. Actually, it's better not to have it in the first place. So just listen to yourself. If someone's talking, there's a way of expressing an opinion. These little things make a huge difference, because every single word, the world was created with words, with 10 utterances. You create worlds with your words. When you say something divisive, even if you don't mean to, you have an impact on the world. So the opposite, these are weeks of empowerment, to use this time to really focus on. We are going through the 3 weeks, literally now. Terrible, terrible things are happening. People are dying. Innocent people are dying. Children are dying. All the things we read about in Eicha and we're going to read about in Tisha B'Av. Nothing new. But the solution is there as well. We know that whenever things changed, it's when the Jews got together and they started working together and they loved each other and they built a unified front. And we need to get back to that. Straight after October 7th, there was that. I'm not sure if it's as strong as it was, but there was the sense that we're all Jews and we're in this together. And we are all in this together. And we need to really go out of our way to include and to talk well about people, to see the good in people, to find compassion, to drop our judgments, to really use this as an important time, and to feel empowered, to know that even a Jew in Sydney can affect what's going on in the war. And I've said this before, it was one of the things when I first became Frum that stuck with me, when someone said to me, and then I was in Johannesburg, that if you eat kosher, you can soften Nasser's heart. He was then the president of Egypt. And I love that. And it's that if you eat kosher, you can soften Hezbollah's heart. If you talk nicely, you can have an impact. Because often people feel helpless, or we just sort of waste our time, as I say, with speech or just reading things. Rather do action. There are many, many mitzvahs you can do. Use this time to use your power as a Jew to make a difference. Not everyone can collect money. Not everyone can drive an ambulance. Not
just keep pushing and be a little crazy and face those fears, and it's scary, but do it anyway. Feel the fear and face it anyway. Like, the fear is not...
That's the right podcast. That's her interviewing Sarah Abraham from Abraham's Tent. Yeah, that's the correct podcast.
What's it called? Chapters with Hannah.
Chapters with Hannah, sorry. Okay, well you found it, yeah. Okay. Yeah. So that's actually Sarah Abrahams, who runs Abraham's Tent for Prince of Wales Hospital. She's, I think, one of their podcasts. Yes, that's Sarah speaking.
Also, interview or they speak to different people.
Yeah. And so she, talks about her life mission and how they came to do that. So not everyone can run an Abraham's Tent. Don't worry, we all have our own individual. But whatever we do out there, it's really about really making a difference and using. And what I wanted to really say today is everybody here has put in years of effort to change. And people have become such a long way. It's incredible how far everybody has come. And you have it within you now. You have the tools. Because what holds people back, like you were asking me the question, I can tell you what the tools are. But if someone hasn't learned the tools and they go, how can I love another person? If you're still filled with hatred and you don't know how to manage your emotions and you don't know about the 4-step process, you still stay your same self. You want to be better, but you don't know how to be. This is why I'm passionate about Emmett, because it tells you how to be better. Recently I heard an example, and I mentioned it at that group, where someone was talking about a member of her family that had really got very angry, and no matter how she asked for forgiveness, it didn't change. But what struck me with that example is when you've been doing Emet for a long time, it's hard to imagine or remember that people can take offense at something and split a whole family over it. Something that often the person doesn't even know what they've done. Because thank God we've all moved from that. Someone doesn't send a thank you note and that's the end. The whole family doesn't speak. Those are the kind of things that I think we've all moved away from. And I'm not judging it. We were all there once. But we have it within us. Use the work that we've done here. You've made such enormous change really to better the world. That is where your power lies. And you're not anybody else. You have your specific areas. And that was the other thing. Last week's Parsha, they were talking about that Hashem, when they went into Israel, they drew lots, the Goyrel. So the Goyrel is a very Jewish concept. They did it on Purim. They've done it quite a few times where it's random. It's like taking a lottery. But the idea is that nothing's random. So what they did was they had the names of the 12 tribes and they had portions of land, and you pull out the portion of the land and you pull out the name of the tribe and you go, oh, Binyamin is going to be in the center of Jerusalem. And you pull out another one and you go, Zevulun is going to be in that portion. But spiritually what it means is we all have our own portion. We all have our own portion in the land of Israel, actually, but we also all have our own portion in the world, our spiritual portion. Hashem gives us our portion. Our portion is our intelligence, our looks, our strength, our health, our family, our money, our homes, our country. That's our portion. We all have our individual portion. And we need to use our portion. So if you are, who was the ship, Zevulun, and they were the seafarers on the ocean, whereas the other people were farmers, the seafarers aren't jealous of the farmers because the seafarers are good at trading on the seas and the farmers are good at agriculture. And often we're jealous of the other person, but we've all got our portion. The idea is, are we maximizing our portion? And that's the famous Reb Zusha story. When he was dying, he said, I'm not upset about dying and I'm not worried because God isn't going to ask me, why weren't you like Moshe? He's going to ask me, why weren't you Zusha? Why weren't you the best Zusha you could be? You don't have to be Moshe. You have to be the best Zusha. So I have to be the best Renee, and everybody here has to be their best selves. And we're not each other. So focus on that and think about something that you can change. And really, it's also okay to say to Hashem, I'm doing this. Please help. We need to pray, and we need to ask for Mashiach. And that's the other thing that I wanted to share, because the whole thing about Tisha B'Av, it's not just the morning of the temple. Part of it, the joy of the pain of the morning, is that there will be redemption. We are waiting for the third temple. And I also believe that our eyes could be opened on that. Often people think that Mashiach, is a sort of remote concept, or people can't even conceive that the world, or wish for the world to be different. Because sometimes you're so comfortable in your world, you don't think about it being different. I remember when I became frum, it was the time in South Africa we had like a few programs on TV, and one of them was Dallas, right? Everyone used to watch Dallas. I think it was a Tuesday night. And there was one TV in the house, and everyone would sit on Tuesday night and watch Dallas together. And the next day you'd go to school or uni and you'd go, what did you think about the episode? And can you believe what J.K. Rowling did? And it was a discussion because there was no binge watching, or everyone was watching the same thing. And it was actually, when I think about it, quite a nice thing. And then at the end of the season, did he live? Did he die? You had to wait for the next season. It was a whole thing. And a comedy kind of frum thing came out called Written to Rejects. And one of them was that someone came and said, Mashiach is here. And the guy turns around and he said, no, please, can I just get to the last episode of Dallas? And that's what often happens, is we feel a bit, and I remember when I listened to it, I thought, I'm a bit like that, I'm doing my master's thesis, and please, can I just finish my thesis? And so that's, if you're very comfortable, I just want to do this, and then, but we're in a phase now where we can actually go, we need Mashiach now. The world is so bad for us, and for everybody, that we need a spiritual solution, because The secular solutions are not winning. Even the biggest intellectuals are anti-Semitic. Everybody, there's so much hate in the world. There's right-wing and left-wing and all this hatred and violence and shootings. And we've run out, as Rabbi Manis Friedman says, of secular solutions. And Mashiach is going to be where godliness is revealed. So that's what I've realized. The Ramban says it's not going to be like we're going to be floating on clouds with wings. It's going to be that godliness is revealed and we'll see all the things that we're learning now and taking on faith. And we should use this time of empowerment to really ask Hashem to change the world, because we can't rely on leaders. Our leaders, let's admit it, are pretty bad leaders. They're not competent, strong leaders, inspiring leaders.
They are till they get into leadership. They have lots of
Yeah. We need a world change, and the Torah tells us that Mashiach is going to bring that. And so this is a time of uncertainty where we need to pray. That was one of the things the Rebbe did, and a lot of people didn't like it. He got people to say, we want Mashiach now. That's all you have to go. God, it's time now. We've had enough. We've tried it all. Bring Mashiach now. We need a world change. And to really, really ask for that. So on a week ago, I took Les to a doctor at Prince of Wales, and we had an early appointment. So I got there very early. We parked on B4, which is where all the doctors park, and we climbed into the lift. It was about 8 o'clock, and it was full of surgeons and doctors. It was packed. And I was right at the back, and I was couldn't see the thing, and I thought short people, the etiquette in the lift should be that short people are allowed near the front. I couldn't see, I couldn't breathe, but there's no etiquette anymore. And we had been listening to a shiur in the car, Les and I, and you know, when you arrive and you switch the car off, it goes off, and then off when you get back in the car, it switches itself back on with the Bluetooth. So it had switched itself off. But perhaps because I was squashed at the back, as we're coming up to ground, the shiur switches on. And it's Rabbi Ruskin, and I kid you not, this is what he's saying. So I remember talking about portioning the land. He said, and when Mashiach comes, the Leviim will have a place in the land of Israel. We will all have a place in the land of Israel, and we will thrive. And I'm like looking in the back to switch it off. And half the people in the lift were Jewish. I didn't know. Their faces lit up. It was a very, I cannot tell you, like a magical moment. They turned up to us in the back. And they smiled. And there was an Israeli in the back in scrubs already. And he said, thank you so much. I really needed that inspiration today. And another girl turned around and she said, yes, we need Mashiach. Everyone in the lift that was Jewish understood the shiur. It was exactly that. And everyone said thank you and walked out like we had done in the service. But what my feeling was, I said, everybody understands we need Mashiach. Everybody. Like it was just this moment of, yes, we need Mashiach. And so that's what I want to inspire us all. We need Mashiach, and we must ask for Mashiach. And it's not a far-off mystical thing. It's something we need that's going to change the world. And I really pray and hope that what we're going through, this war, is the prelude. I mean, some rabbis say it is, I don't know. But the prelude that we are fighting evil, and it is with the Jews will be showing the world the way forward. And we are empowered now to ask for Mashiach, to change our ways, and to inspire the people around us to make a real difference. So having said all that, we'll now go back to the basics of how we change and how we improve. And the biggest thing is changing the way that we think about things. Because when you change your thoughts, you change your feelings and you change your actions. So I just lost the place, so I'm going to go here. No one probably remembers exactly. I don't either. So it's interesting because we were talking about love is a verb. And this chapter is talking about the gift of acting and thinking as if. So Pesachim says, a person should always occupy himself with Torah and mitzvahs, even if not for their own sake, because out of doing them from an ulterior motive, one can come to do them for their own sake. So this is the idea, we will do and we will hear. That's what the Jews said when we got the Torah. Even if you don't believe something, like if you say, I want Mashiach now, remember words create, even if you don't 100% believe it, that's okay. Just say the right thing. Even if you don't really feel loving, that's okay. Act loving. Because Torah is about action much more than feeling. The feeling follows. And I'm going to digress again because you saw Richard Chakanovsky on Sunday night. Barbara and I went on Monday night to Adam Butt. And he's a barrister that represented 5 boys that went to Brighton High School in Melbourne. And it was like a 7-year case.
7 years.
7 years, and they eventually won most of it, nearly everything. And I thought it was brilliant to actually hear what they did. And one of the things, actually there are 2 things that I actually want to say that most people don't go through with these court cases because first of all, they're prohibitively expensive. So potentially, if he didn't do what he did about limiting the costs, and if he said he would go pro bono, then there's a way, if it's of public interest, the judge will say it should go, they could do it. Otherwise, it could be $9 million. And if you lose that case, then you have to pay it. So a lot of people don't do it because it's so expensive. So he was really saying there are ways of doing it.
Keith means anti-defamation or what's the...
Well, I'll tell you a little bit about what they did. I mean, I can't give you all the laws, but they had to find an angle of how it would work, and there was systemic anti-Semitism. So the headmaster, they didn't sue the kids because he didn't want to bully the kids, but they sued the 2 headmasters and some teachers. The headmaster actually was the state, Victorian Education. Yeah. And the headmaster actually was the son of a Nazi, and he used to give Nazi speeches.
Wow.
Yeah. And they and there was a teacher that particularly picked on one of the boys, and he would call him like a Ben Zoyma, which is like the son of a prostitute in Hebrew. And this continued, but the boys were assaulted, physically beaten. One had a knife at his throat, and they asked for protection, and they were basically seen as a nuisance. But what they did, which was I thought was so that was the first thing he said, and the other thing he told them, you actually have to stick it out. Like the courts try and make you do mediation, but you actually have to see it through. So if there's a court case, what it gave me was a lot of hope that if you find the right person, we shouldn't just give up. There are legal routes and the laws are in place. But the other thing he said was, when they started, only about 20 people came. But by the end, like 100 people came and they had to turn people away. And he said having support in the courtroom meant a lot. And he basically said it's something we should think about. So I wanted to share that if you know there's a court case like this going, as a barrister, he said it meant a lot that people came and supported.
So there's 2 things.
Yeah.
He said that
Yeah.
one should go and support it. And the other thing is that as Jews, with all this anti-Semitism and what's going on, we sorely lack in finance. Like no one's financially backing. They took 2 barristers and 5 solicitors took on this case on the boys' side. They earned $130,000 between the 7 of them over 7 years.
Yeah.
Okay, so I mean it didn't even cover any of their costs. And so what they're saying is the other thing is we as a community have to learn to also finance these things.
Yeah.
We actually have to put our money where our mouths are because otherwise these court cases don't go. And you wouldn't have got the email because I was in contact. But on Monday night, Adam is speaking again. You have to book through Humanitix, just so they know who's coming, at Central on taking on Sydney Uni.
So Monday night, Adam Butt is talking about taking on Sydney Uni.
Wow.
Yeah.
I'll look for it. He's saying on Monday night, it's an email, but I'll work it
Yeah,
out.
you can look at
So
Central
Monday
Shore.
night is again on Central Shore. It's on Golda. It's on that Operation Golda.
All right.
Al's father. He is going to take on Sydney Uni. But again, what he's saying is that as Jews, if we really want legal remedy, because these boys got $500,000 each, and in American terms it's nothing, but apparently in Australian terms it was huge. And all the precedents that have been set by that, they got, the interesting part about that case was it 55, so that these schools really protected their LGBT.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say, yeah.
And so their letterheads would have all the gay pride stuff and then a swastika. And everybody just ignored the swastika and everybody would. And these gay
overturned swastikas.
These gay boys at the school went to court, none of them are Jewish, went to court and stood up and said we were protected and the Jews weren't.
That was what won the case. It would have been one thing to say the Jews weren't protected, but they showed that the school had the processes to protect
55 of them or something.
60, yeah.
That would be the approach. I mean, it wouldn't come
No,
from-
but he was very
But
clever.
they volunteered. They
He
went
said, and they were in year 11 and 12. He said when he was in year 11 and 12, he
Yeah.
wouldn't have taken time off school. He said these people had a conscience. They saw that the protective processes were in the school for all other minorities except the Jews. And that was like the winning thing.
When they went to the councillors, they had a whole department that like the counselling for minorities and that. The councillors all knew the perpetrators, their names, their history, but they did not know the victims' names.
Yeah. So one example, so they had wellness, they have these safety plans. So all the bullies had safety plans. So the one example is they say you have to have proof. So when the Jewish boys, one of the Jewish boys became from around bar mitzvah and was wearing a yarmulke, and that was a big problem. And then a second boy wasn't from, but he dafka wore a yarmulke as to show. So they kept saying you have to have proof when they came and they complained. And so they would be walking in the playground and someone would do a Heil Hitler salute. But one of them actually put a swastika on his hand. So when he did the Heil Hitler salute, the Jewish boy grabbed him, was able to get him to the headmaster's office, threw him down and said, have a look, there's a swastika on his hand. He was suspended, the Jew, for 2 days for pushing the other guy. And that other guy had a safety plan. So it was a systemic problem. So this Monday night they're doing, and this is going to be an ongoing court case, and if people have time, we should go to the court and we need to support in whatever way, because the laws are here. And this is what I'm saying, is that we need to stick together and be unified, and in any way that we can assist, think bigger. I thought that's an amazing thing that people can do, is be part of the court case, even if you just go and watch and tell people about it, get more people interested. It's a really, really big problem. And the other thing they did, which he said has never been done, is they had a night at Caulfield Shul, 200 people. They got an apology from the headmaster, the government, or was anybody else? They actually gave public apologies.
Physically they came, or representatives came.
Yeah. But he said it didn't go the way they planned it. The boys just ranted at them.
Yeah, the boys didn't want it to go.
Yeah.
There was another headmaster that stood up, who was a headmaster of 2 private schools and 2 public
That's
schools.
right.
And he stood up and said, it was not Jewish, as a headmaster, what's gone there is not how school should be run. And he also stood up and gave very firm evidence about what happened to them.
Yeah, and how it was a failed duty of
And how
care.
they felt duty of care, and that's what benefits the government.
That's how the world's a bit different.
But
But
this
since
was
you got
before
back
October
now-
the 7th. This started in like 2013.
And
So long before October the 7th, systemic bullying in non-Jewish schools. I don't know if it was a Catholic school.
No,
Is
it's
Brighton
private.
just, it's a public school, yeah.
That's why Victoria government.
And how everybody covered up, like the headmaster, they all covered up for each other, including the psychologist in
And
the
they were
school.
told, leave, go to another school.
Yeah, yeah.
They record it at Central.
You can ask Golda if she did the one who, but there was a woman.
7 years.
7 years.
My son used to work for the solicitors taking it on pro bono, these fantastic litigators named Stuart Levitt, who's taking on this and he's doing a pro bono, and he's got a non-Jewish barrister who's apparently, my son's own business, they say he's pro bono.
So this is where the solicitors were Catholic.
His nephew had been particularly
Fantastic.
affected by this.
He said as well the solicitors were Catholic. They all did it pro bono, which is really heartwarming. And so what I want to just end with saying is, what he was saying is, you can't always change people's beliefs, but you can change their actions. And then he quoted something from the Torah that says, we do it is ki lo lishmo bo lishmo. He didn't say these words, but if you do it for the wrong reason, eventually you might change. But the idea is act right. So he was saying, and it did happen in the school, someone used the N word, and everyone knows you can't do it, and so you don't do it. Or you can't walk up to someone and call them a faggot. Everyone knows you can't. You can think faggot, but you're not allowed to say it. But with anti-Semitism, no one's saying anything. So he's saying, he believes that there has to be, consequences, so that even if you can't change the anti-Semitic thinking, you can change the behaviour. And that's what he quoted, and that's what made me think about it, that our actions are the most important thing, and it's good if you feel the right thing afterwards, but it's not essential.
So